This is an area that there's not a lot of people who really fully understand what's available to them. I think Michael presented the law extremely well. There are some huge inequities out there that most of us just aren't paying attention to. And there's some wonderful resources, and that's what I'm going to try to do in the next 30 minutes, give you some in-the-trenches ideas of how you can do better in your negotiation and come away with some resources that can make your city better. Let me qualify before I get started by talking about what I hope we'll do in the next 30 minutes is tell you how to prepare for the battle so you don't have a war. This is not designed to create enemies between us and our county, but it could. But the more prepared you are, the less likely that is to happen. Okay? So we want to, we talk about it's not fun, but it can be. I love negotiations. I love to get in there, particularly if I have all the right answers. When you're playing cards and you got the deuces and the one-eye jacks and they're all in your hand, it's more fun to play poker when you're holding all the cards. So I'm going to give you some ideas and ways you can hold some cards when you go negotiations that makes this quite not so painful. A couple of tips also, too, that we used in Rincon. I'll show you the success we had through our negotiations for our 3 cities in our area. We began communicating with our commissioners because when I came to the table to work with the City of Rincon, there was not very good relationships between our county and our city. I mean, they were at each other, and we weren't communicating. It seemed like everything was a legal battle and a suit. So the first thing I did is I tried to help them with their finances because they were a little behind on their audits and so forth. Is we put together a 10-year plan, and we talked about where we want to be. Where do you want your city limits to be? How far do you want to annex? Where do you want to run your water and sewer? We looked at took the comprehensive plan. We began with that and began to build it. So we wanted to know where we were going to go. Because if you go into this business of negotiating service delivery just to get more money, you're going to create enemies. But if you can go to your commissioners like we did, and we began to talk to them, took them out to eat, asked the council, give me a little budget. I need to talk to these guys and gals. And sit down with them. And I began to show them what we need in recreation, what we need in roads, what we need in drainage is a huge problem as we're growing and we bring more boxes in and more asphalt. And so I began to show them our need before we began to do the battling over the service delivery. But I already knew the numbers of what I wanted to do. I just had to convince them of the needs. Does that make sense? And I think when you do that, you got to remember we're family. We live in the same county, go to the same churches, go to the same Rotary Club, and they got to sit across from these commissioners. And I don't want to say, there's that old Wesley took us for a ride, So part of this is communication. So I'm going to give you some things I think that'll help you. Be sure to remember to communicate, and you can have fun. And also, as Michael said earlier, this is not just for service delivery. We use this in our laws. When I put together our laws packet, we were ready to go to court. And it's a long introduction, I know, let me say this too. You got to be ready to do war, or don't go to battle. Don't prepare for battle. If you don't have I don't want to be too strong, but if you don't have the stomach for it, don't get into it. People will negotiate more if you negotiate from strength, professionally and respectfully, communicating, but they got to know if it needs to go to court, that's where we'll go. And there were times when we made that point. But if you look at what I'm going to show you now and what Michael's showing you and probably what's coming afterwards, and you're ready, you'll find that you'll have a better position with your county as you move into this. So we're going to focus on, there's a lot about the law and there's a lot about boundaries, but I'm going to focus on tax equity and how you can put some trump cards, okay, in your negotiation pile when you go to work with them. And I'm going to go to the ABCs of what I believe is important. First of all, you need to understand the law. The 2 things, I'm going to do a little repetition before I get into some techniques and strategies. The A part and the B part of House Bill 49 is so important when you look at it. Says first in A, the cost of any service which a county provides primarily for the benefit of the unincorporated area of the county shall be borne by the unincorporated area, residents, individuals, property owners who receive that service. Okay? That's the law. If you can show, and I'm going to show you how to do that, if you can show that certain people are getting the service, the primary benefit, you've satisfied half of the requirement. If it has to go to a legal route and you prepare a good argument, you're on good ground. And they'll know if you got a good argument. Now, if you can prove that, and we're going to talk about how to do that, and this is something you got to remember. If the county doesn't know this, I can remind them, if we win this argument There's only 4 revenues. Remember Michael said that earlier? There's only 4 revenues you can use to fund these roads, these recreation, this drainage, this fire, or whatever. There's only 4 revenues that you can use for your zoning, your senior citizens, whatever you got. Those are things that we had as duplicated type services. Only 4 revenues: insurance premium tax, property tax for a special district, user fees, and assessments. That's it. They can't use lost. They can't use pilots. Can't use franchise, Cablevision. I mean, there's a lot of money out they couldn't use. Wouldn't that change their budget a little bit? So you got to do a good job on the front end of defining these services. And so it's going to require that you identify the services provided by your county and your city, and you classify them. And it's going to take some research and some study to do that. You can find this information from their financial audits, from their budgets, and also the DCA reports. Everybody familiar with the DCA filings that you have? It shows the detailed service costs, the funding of each service, and provides all that. You put all this together, and we actually put it into a document. Let me just show you a picture real quickly of a document. This is just one page of it, where I listed every service, and it went on for a couple, 3 pages, that they had, and we did a detailed analysis to find out, is this service a duplicated service? Is it a countywide service? Or is it a hybrid service? We're going to talk about hybrid services a little bit. Those are the services where the primary benefit is for the unincorporated area, and they don't believe it, and we got to convince them of it. So you want to evaluate, classify them by the areas that I just gave you. That's going to take some analysis. And this is what we used, and some other things as well, but we used 3 tests basically to come up with. You won't find this in the law, but you need a basis for primary use. We use location, population, and use of service. And I'll give you some specific examples of how we applied that to our working with the county in our negotiations. Roads, for example. And every county, every city is going to be different. And I understand that. You got to look at your particular situation. Spend a lot of time analyzing this. In our county, the county spends absolutely no dollars on the roads inside the city. So we said location. Where are the roads that you spend your money on? You got to put it simple to get before a judge, right? In the unincorporated area. Okay? Primary benefits, unincorporated area. How about the population? Where's the greater population? In our county, it's in the county. So population, 80% of the population is using those roads. Only 20% of us are using it. But the next thing was really huge, use of service. We can access every single recreation facility they have, every government building they have, and only 2 elementary schools can we not access by a Georgia highway. We don't even need the county roads to access all the services they provide. Does that make sense? So use of service, we don't really need it. That's a strong argument. And so with roads, we said, you're the primary user. And they began to get a little concerned that we might could convince the judge of this, okay? Because we had a good argument why you're the primary user. Take recreation, give you another example. Location. In our particular county, yours may be different. They haven't spent any money within our city limits in the last 20 years on any recreational parks. A little bit different from the Savannah situation. So once again, everybody's different. No gymnasiums, no ball fields, no football fields, no parks in 20 years. But yet we, the city, are paying the same tax as the unincorporated area. If you remember what Michael said a while ago, there's 87 counties in this 159 that are paying the same ad valorem tax in the city or outside the city. That tells me there's a lot of inequity, probably some sitting right here in this room. You just need to be able to find it so you can win the argument. So population is the same argument, but use of service. And I'll give you one little secret. Can't give you all my secrets, but you call me. One little secret how you use use of service. Once again, we could access all their services, recreation, by state roads. But they don't have a transportation system. You got to look at all these services and all the supplemental powers and what they do. And so we said, you don't have any recreation facilities inside our city. So how are the underprivileged and the disabled going to use your services in our city? And we put a little tear in our eye. How are they going to get to your services? You're not providing it. You see what I'm saying? That's a big problem for them. They're not providing their services countywide because a lot of people can't even use it. Does that make sense? You got to think outside the box and think, how can I define so that if it goes to a court, not only through my commissioner's seat, and I sit down with them, The primary use is the unincorporated area, but I got a good argument for it too. So you want to be able to support it. You get through drainage, you get through all the services you list. Is that making sense? And so you got to do a good job of defining these services and why the county's getting the primary benefit, because you're looking for that inequity that's taking place. So I just gave you a couple examples of that. Next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to study the financial audits. At least this is what we did, and you're going to run the numbers. Now this is the approach we take, and I take this approach because it puts a picture. A picture is worth 1,000 words, isn't it? If you can see the picture of the inequity, it's one thing to talk about it, people not getting so, but if you can put it and quantify it in numbers, and that even becomes more frightful for our county commissioners, but also beneficial as they begin to see how the inequity is. I can say, listen, Vera, this is really inequitable. Here's the dollars it's costing us. What's going on? Well, you're going to need to, what you need to be provided from the county's financial audits, but you will also need their expense details, which the most accurate expense detail I found is the auditor's trial balance. I did audits for years. And does everybody know what an auditor's trial balance is? It takes the trial balance from the city or the county, and if they make adjustments or transfers or reclasses, it puts them into the correct balance that's going to be on the audit. So you can actually take the audit number off the department, you can tie it right into the trial balance. That's real helpful, because particularly when I find things I'm going to show you that I found and I need to reclass them, I can show them how I did that. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but you need to run the numbers so you can quantify the tax inequity that's taking place. Study the financial statements to run the numbers. You need to know the funding sources. So when I received the audits, and I went back about 5 years to do my analysis, and then I expanded it when I found some things that I found, and I'll show you what I found. One thing I'm looking for is the funding sources for all those services that I identified. Okay, I've got my start. Here's my services. Duplicated, or countywide, hybrids, duplicated. And now I'm going to come up with the cost as well. I'll share that in a minute, but I'm going to put the funding sources here for you now. Here's some funding sources a lot of people don't even think about. When I was beginning to examine our county's audits, and our attorney came to me and said, can you look over the audits and see how are they complying with service delivery, or are they using to fund these special service strategy services? I said, sure, I'll look at it. Here's what I found. Our county was making loans to the special service districts. One service district had a $12 million loan. That's non-compliance with the service delivery agreement. That's really a funding. You understand what I'm saying? Here's this special service that they're providing to the unincorporated area. They can't afford to provide it, but the general fund has plenty of money. Why? Because they're taxing all of us. They said, hey, let's just loan the money to the special service fund, $12 million. Well, our attorney got really excited when I showed him about that one, because that's a big ace in the hole when you go to negotiate. Because the next thing I noticed was, looking at what their revenue expenditures were, they couldn't pay that back for the next 20 years, maybe not 30 years. Well, being a CPA in my background, an auditor, I knew the general Suffolk County principle says, if you can't pay it back, what do you got to do with that interfund loan? Anybody know? Huh? So to speak, you got to make it a transfer. You got to make it an equity transfer. Well, that's automatically a violation of service delivery, because you just funded with tax dollars from the unincorporated area in the incorporated area, with the unincorporated area. So they couldn't do that. So when we would tell, I already knew this, I built the relationships, but I knew that they owed us, and our percentage of that assessed digest that Mike was talking about, ours was 15%. Take 15% of $12 million. That's a huge number. And I began to feel really good about these negotiations, but I need the farmers. So look more than just the local funding. Look at what they've been doing in the past history. Next thing, watch out for transfers from service delivery to special service districts, okay? Because transfers get buried after 1 year. If you put in a transfer, where does it go? It goes into fund balance. You'll never see it again. That's why I went back several years, so I could track the transfer. So not only did I get this $12 million that was on the books, I picked up another few million that were in transfers that were just along the way. They got buried, and I brought them back up and said, all right, this is what we're really talking. This is what you've taken in tax dollars and you've put over here to a special service district. Make sense? So you got to look at the funding sources outside of just those enumerated and non-enumerated sources. So what are the funding sources used by the county for service delivery? You want to examine that. There's the 4 enumerated sources. You want to track those. Insurance premium tax is one you want to track. You want to see how they're using those enumerated So what they're going to use those for, okay? Non-enumerated, you want to track those. What's a non-enumerated source? It's anyone that's not the enumerated, okay? And so you want to track those and see how they're using them, because all the non-enumerated sources have to be used for county-wide services. And we found, and we did, they were using some of them for special service. That's another hole. Something I got in my pocket, you got to move that back out. You cannot use that any longer. Now, like Michael said, you can negotiate other sources and you can allow things to happen. And that's what we did. We didn't go in there to be ugly and just try to win this big battle and get a bunch of money. We had a plan. We needed resources. We wanted to solve inequities. We were showing them the inequities, and we did compromise and allowed them to use some resources in the special service areas that they couldn't have done without a compromise. We compromise because if it goes to the judge, he may not see our side of it, right? So it's always good to not go to but you got to be ready to go. And so that's what you're trying to work toward. Another thing we looked at was what are the general fund reserves accumulated and what was the source. So I did an analysis of that to find out found they had $36 million in reserves, uncommitted to anything. Of course, I knew what $12 million of it was. It was in a loan to the special service district. That still is a pretty good balance of reserves. And so we didn't get anything out of those reserves because they hadn't used it yet. We couldn't justify that, but they knew we were watching it from that point on. Does that make sense? So it helped all the county taxpayers. So City of Rincon was really beneficial in saying, all right, let's make sure we spend this money right. Let's get some decreased taxes in the future if we need to. But I think you want to look at those reserves. And then how about the interest loss from general fund transfers and loans? Most people wouldn't even thought about that. But I'm a numbers guy. And if you got $12 million, I know there's interest on that $12 million, and that's another million too. So I'll put that number in there too. So I said, this is what you cost us for the last 10 years. I went back 10 years after I saw what's happened in 5 years. Make sense? So these are numbers you want to look at in addition to taking all the non-enumerated revenues and tracing and seeing what they do. And we did a little analysis. Once again, you can't see this, but it's a page like this where I took all the non-enumerated revenues and scheduled them out and applied them to all the services in accordance with the law. And the whole purpose of that is to come up with the amount of property tax they use for each service. That's important. You'll see why that is in just a minute. So we're still studying the financial numbers. You've got to look at the cost, research what is included in the cost of service, special delivery strategy services and general fund services. You really need to do a detailed analysis of what's in there, and Michael's already talked about some. They were obviously taking their administrative costs and paying it with countywide monies, and we made them distribute that to all the special service districts, which of course lowered the amount of property taxes they could say they were actually spending on countywide services, which made more reserves, which made more money we could bargain for. Does that make sense? You got to make them distribute all these administrative services. Who pays the payroll for the water and sewer fund? Probably the financial administration of the countywide administrative service. Does that make sense? They pay all the bills, the accounts payable, so they split that out. Engineering. Many times the engineering will be buried, particularly if they understand service delivery. They'll bury that engineering in some kind of administrative cost. Okay? Or if that engineering was designing drainage in the county or designing water and sewer lines and so forth, but because it wasn't assigned to a project, they put it in general engineering, general administrative, and it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, in our community, remember, our community, 15% is what our tax base is of the whole county-wide. Doesn't sound like a lot. If you got $100,000 of engineering fees that should be assigned to a special service district, there's $15,000 that belongs to us. What could you do with $15,000? I could do a lot. Make sense? So you want to do the detailed analysis, and that's why the detailed trial balance helps you out. You can go in there and start from there. And then if you want to request open records from information, find out what's in those accounts and look at them. And they will they're not trying to cheat. I'm not trying to say that, but we tend to spend things, don't we? So we'll try to justify to put these costs somewhere we can deduct it. I think I heard Michael or somebody say they'll even put stuff in the sheriff's department if you're not careful because they know you can't touch it over there right now. We need to rise up with GMA and try to get something changed on the sheriff. That's a very big inequity. And I'm not sure, you might address this later. You can't address it in service delivery, but we tried to address it. Going to court, we addressed it during Lost.
Every elected official and the sheriff is an elected official.
Yeah.
They can sit down and discuss services.
Yeah. We made it an issue because we can't really make it an issue as far as funding so much for this, but it could do it for law. So I actually ran the numbers on it for lost and come back to them. You can also negotiate SPLOST. Make people know that. Population is just a fallback. There's a lot of things you can do to resolve inequities. You just need to be aware there's some ways to do that. But you got to run the numbers, in my opinion, if you want to do a good job and really be able to know that when you get to the court, the judge will see it, and you can win this argument and convince your commissioners that there's inequity. So there's general service costs, admin, financial, all that needs to be divided out. Engineering, we talked about that. Maintenance, we saw where they would take all the maintenance of all the buildings and they threw them into a one administrative fund to take like the janitorial. This for all the buildings, even the water and sewer and the wastewater treatment facilities. It was all in a county-wide fund. Does that make sense? And we said, no, you can't do that. You got to break these things out. So just if you want to get down to the weeds, there's some good resources there to do that. Okay, I'm not sure if I skipped a slide here. Make sure. Yeah, this is where we're at. Now, I want you to understand the fear factor. Once you come up with the numbers, and what we did, we came up with what every department, the property taxes that were used by the county for every single service they perform. Okay. Once I had that, and I had that property tax that they were using for roads, recreation, drainage, senior citizens, because we provide that as well. Jail, different things. There's some things in jail we resolved because we used to pay a lot of money for using the jail. Now we negotiated jail fee, which helped us out. We actually, in the fire, we have to negotiate a contract. We actually get $500,000 a year, which is not going to be part of the revenues. I'm going to show you what we came about during our service delivery. We actually obtained a $500,000 contract from them for fire services. It was one of our weak areas. We were going to lose that argument, so we beefed up our fire department, got a better ISO than they did. It was more advantageous for them to invest in us than circle us and close us out. So we knew where we wanted to go, and we did what we had to do to make it work. And so we actually have resources from them that helps us have a better fire department. But here's the whole point. When you get down to it and you come up with what the property taxes they're using on these primary services, you want to know what the fear factor is. And this is the fear factor. I'm going to repeat it. We said it several times a day. There's only 4 enumerated revenues available for a special service, special delivery strategy services. Only 4. And if I have a good argument, I can show the taxes you're taking out of my city for your unincorporated area for the primary benefit. And it's a really darn good argument. And I've got a good picture of it, then they have some fear, don't they? Because what if they couldn't use, in our city, it's not a lot, maybe it's more than yours, but what if they could not use their $7 million in loss any longer to help pay for roads and recreation and drainage and so many other services that we saw were primarily for the benefit of the unincorporated area? What if they had to not use their pilot, which is about $1.5 million, payment in lieu of taxes? We had about $9 million they could no longer use, or maybe 10, if we won this battle. See how it brings them to the table if you know what you're dealing with and you know the property taxes? Okay. So, and here's the thing, if it goes to and they know this, there we go. These are set clearly in the statute and the court cannot adjust it. You understand that? Judge can't say, well, I think this is a good revenue. I think they should be able to use because this particular tax is collected mainly from the unincorporated area. I think they could use it. No, he can't do that. He can't. Once he makes a decision that the primary benefit is for the unincorporated area, there's only 4 revenues they can use. So that's the fear factor. And that was the fear factor that our county had. We kept reminding them, if we go to court and you lose this, only 4 revenues you can use. Right now, we'll negotiate. And some of the things we did is we let them use the pilot. We let them use some penalties and interest from taxes. So we made some huge concessions. But what we received was what we needed, more than we needed. We might be a little stronger next time. But we're trying to keep the family together in Effingham County and Rincon, so you're going to have some compromises. We negotiated financial possibilities, and these are some you could have tax rollback to one or more municipalities. That was the first thing we proposed to them, is that it had been a millage rollback of 4 or 5 meals for us if they had taken the dollars that I had come up with and what we had all agreed at one point we finally come up with a number that this is what the inequity is, and they agreed to pay it to us. And how do you pay it to us? And we wanted it first in a rollback so it helped the citizens. They didn't want to do a rollback. You know why? You think why they would not want to do a rollback? Everybody want to annex, wouldn't they? If they had a lower millage rate. So they didn't want to annex. They didn't want to roll back. They said, we'll pay it to you. So they're paying us a cash payout for the next 10 years unless we renegotiate the service delivery, and we're fixing to go back and do some renegotiating. And I think we'll do a little better even than what we've done. So they chose a payment of cash and in kind to resolve inequity. You can do that. Lump sum payments for violations. We received, our city alone, $2.3 million of that violation of $12 million. We said, all right, you can't pay it back. We'll let you keep it in the special service district, but you give us a share of it. So we negotiated $2.3 million. We represented all the cities, and they got about 3.3 together, but we got 2.3 of that. That was huge for us. We built 4 new baseball fields and fixed to build a concession building, and we widened the road. It was crucial to our commercial district, and so but I'd already shown this is what we need. We need a gymnasium now, so there's a lot of things, but that's what we did. We got a lump sum payment. Improved equity and monitoring of service delivery. Everything we did, we made sure it was an agreement. I think you mentioned that earlier. That was a good idea. This calculation of how we calculate inequity, we put it in our document. So you can't go back later on and say, well, we didn't talk about that, or we didn't say that. No, this is the service that we agree with. Hybrids, duplicated, this is it. Okay, if you had a new service, we'll talk about it then. Does that make sense? So we got it in a document, so it makes monitoring a lot easier in the future. We don't go back over the old material. How to calculate a rollback. Let me just kind of show you some numbers. I'm going to flip through this other slide because you can't see it anyway. That's a copied spreadsheet, you can't see it. This is the amount of property tax when I took the producer. This is road. You can't see this is how it works, but I took the amount of cost, took the revenues that went against that road, prorated all the non-enumerated revenues that you could do. But we agreed they could use lost on that. That was one of our things we couldn't use on the other ones, but we'll let them use it on this. And so we came up with this is how much property taxes were left over they had to have to fund the roads. Okay. And since we had a good argument that the primary use of those roads were in the unincorporated area, we got 15% of that, or $292,578 for 10 years. If that just goes up, we'll get more. If it goes down, we'll get less. Okay. And then recreation, we did the same thing. And so this is the final result of our negotiation. And this is for all the cities, not just us. We represented all the cities in our area. We were not an affected city. You understand what an affected city is? We weren't 9,000. We missed it by like 60 people. So we had to have another municipality so we could be 50% of the non-affected cities. If not, they wouldn't have to sit down with us. So they have to sit down with us because we have to get our signature. So that made us an affected city. And so at the end, we negotiated for an annual cash payment for 10 years, which would total $4 million, $409,000 a year to all 3 cities. About 300 of that. And then a cash payment in reserve for $3.3 million. So we negotiated for total cash receipts of $7,383,000 to satisfy our tax inequities. And that's huge for us. I don't know would that be huge for you, but that was huge for us. The reason I got into the weeds because every $30,000 I found was another $4,500 in monies that I could bargain with and use to negotiate. And so these are some of the things that we have done. It kind of shows you how you can get there. But I think the key again is being prepared, knowing where the inequities are, being able to find those inequitable services, quantify them in a way that anybody could understand them, and then communicate. Communicate. Okay? So this is what we did in Rincon, and maybe that'll help you a little bit as you try to look and see what you want to do. Okay?